I said a moment ago, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Really appreciate everybody giving up their time. For some of you, it will be the first time you've joined one of these forums. Other people will have been in a number of times before. So if you're new, welcome. The control panel instructions are on the screen at the moment. So do just have a quick look at those, how to use them. The key buttons are the hand up button or the chat function, because you're all now muted by us, the organisers. So if you want to talk, we'll need to unmute you, and then you will be able to talk. And that just keeps us, kind of keeps the noise and the background level down. So hopefully everybody can hear clearly. So that's good. If you have joined us before, welcome back. And hopefully you've got all the tech stuff absolutely wired now. So we'll be flying through that. We are a reasonably small group this evening. We had a slightly bigger one earlier, as I was just saying, and tomorrow is completely full. So another good week of lots of Southwest clubs getting involved in this forum. So that's fantastic. So as I said, I'm Rob Howlett, the Regional Development Officer, for those of you who don't know me. We're going to go around the group and just let the other people on the screen introduce themselves. So as far as I can see next to me, it's Pete Bone. That might be different for everyone else. But Pete, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this online discussion. Pete Bone, based up in the Cotswold Water Park as a Sailing Development Officer. Thank you for attending this evening.
Unmuted.
Oh, over to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz, Sailing Development Officer based down in Cornwall, and it's really lovely to see so many Cornish clubs here today. I think 50% of the clubs that are here are Cornish today, so well done.
Awesome, excellent, good. A high Cornish contingent in this evening, for sure. Okay, over to Pete, the other Pete.
Yeah, Pete. Currently trapped in Cardiff, but yeah, Sailing Development Officer in the what do we call it? The north of the southwest.
Yeah, excellent, cool, thank you. And Jack.
Yeah, I'm Jack Finnick. I'm the Keelboat Development Manager. I work in the RYA Racing Department. I was involved in helping draft the guidance note on return to racing, and generally look after keelboat racing of various different descriptions, match racing, keelboat league, etc. Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so Pete and Liz, we will see again later. Jack and myself are going to stay on screen. And the reason Jack's joined us this week is the topic, as you know, is all about planning to safely restart racing. So, you know, Jack's got a huge amount of knowledge on this, and as he just said, was involved in writing the guidance notes. So hopefully we'll have a lot to add to some of your questions that you might have and the discussion that we'll have later. Few bits, and again, sorry for those people who've been here before, but I just want to repeat how it works. So we're recording the session just so everyone's aware, and it will be put up, or one of the three will be put up on the RYA website for people to watch back. You're all muted, so if you want to speak, press your hand up button and we'll try and come to you as quickly as we can. Or you can put a question or a comment in the chat function and we might come back to you that way. Also, there is going to be plenty of time. As you know, if you've been on these before, the bulk of this is about group discussion, and we're looking at what best practice looks like between all of us, and kind of trying to hopefully stamp out any myths and help you along the way. So the aims tonight, as you know, we're going to focus in on the guidance to start with, look at what's available, where it's pointing us and you at the moment. Then we're going to look at, and this will be the first discussion topic, the different formats of competition that you can look to implement, or the ideas that you've got that you're thinking of implementing at the different phases of return within your club. So not really zooming in too much on right now. Right now is important, we do want to look at that, but we can look at the bigger picture as well, you know, 2 months down the line, or when we're allowed to meet in slightly larger groups, what are people thinking? Also, then the second breakout challenge, or the chat that we'll be having, will be around the challenges around running any form of competitive sailing at the moment. So what are the challenges we're going to face, and if we've got any ways to overcome those. Finally, obviously, we're hoping you're going to leave with some ideas and feeling a little bit more kind of in place to make some decisions and start making some risk assessments for your club. As always, we don't plan to give specific club advice on the forum, just because it's a bit too hard to do. We haven't got that many clubs in tonight, so we may be able to go a little bit deeper, but you know, that said, we have got dinghy and yacht clubs with us, so we don't want to focus in too much on specific club challenges, but we are, as always, happy to do that afterwards, and that goes for both the development team, so the SDOs and myself, and also the racing team from Jack and his team over there. So agenda, as I've said, guidance followed by discussions, and then at the end some further resources and any questions. So I think it's worth just taking a look at the current situation and the guidance that sits with that. So this statement was adjusted last Friday, or well, I think it actually only made it to the paperwork on Monday, but Boris's announcement was last Friday, and the paperwork was changed on Monday. So that is that we can now meet with 5 other people from outside our household, as long as we stay 2 meters apart. There is obviously other wording around that, but I'm not going to read it all to you. All of these links to all of the guidance comes out after this forum, so you'll get an email follow up with all the different links to the various guidance you might want to look at. So hopefully that will help. So as well as that government guidance, obviously the restart boating activity along with the racing activity, restart racing guidance is both there, and those 2 documents are meant to work together. So you're supposed to look at the restart boating activity and the racing guidance at the same time to help you along the way with your decisions and risk assessments. And again, the RYA are just following that government advice and trying to keep up to date. And this week we did a really good job about that. That guidance was only updated by the government on Monday, and by Tuesday the RYA guidance was already up to date and following that. So I think that is staying up to date, and it allows you to follow government advice by working with the RYA guidelines, and then sticking to this considerate and conservative approach. And I think with competition that looks slightly different to what it does with recreational boating. Recreational boating has a different flavour when we're thinking about considerate and conservative, and hopefully that will come out in some of our discussions in a little bit. So this bit I think really is where we'll come to Jack and start to have a conversation around this particular section of the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And this flexibility and innovation section is the area that's caused a lot of clubs some kind of angst. And as well as that angst of trying to understand all the guidance, I understand that there are lots of clubs around the country and in the Southwest who are really under pressure from their members to move forward with racing and really push on with activity and do more than many club committees are happy to do at the moment. So we're aware of the pressure you're under when you're trying to make these decisions, and that's hopefully why we're going to visit this now, and hopefully it will help clear up some worry or some question marks that people have. So I think we start with the kind of the lower bullet point, which is the limit on gatherings being no more than 6, and it means that it's unlikely to be possible to host amateur events or competitions at this time. And that's kind of the negative side. But then when you look at the flexibility and innovation section a little bit higher up, or it's all in the same section, but the bullet point higher up, talking about clubs looking at measures they can put in place to enable them to return, and organisations are encouraged to creatively think about how best to make their sport activity possible within the guidelines. So those 2 statements kind of conflict each other a little bit. And Jack, what's your thinking on that?
My thinking is to remember to press the mute button. Apologies. Yeah, I think it's sort of like a risk assessment, but it's slightly different. This is about thinking about the areas where you might find pinch points, where you're going to get more than 6 people coming together in an organized gathering, and then using your imagination to think of ways that you can achieve the same goals in a completely different manner. This is essentially saying that business as usual is no more, but that we can achieve what we want to achieve by doing other things. And we can throw it all in there. We can talk about thinking outside the box, or all the other bingo words that we want to put in there. But this is very much being encouraged to think about other options to comply with the guidance, to get rid of any possible gatherings and so forth, and think about ways that you can satisfy your members' desires to go and be competitive and to go and assess their performance, some good, some bad, but to think about different options than the standard traditional one start line, one course, all that kind of stuff. So it's not bad news. In fact, it is good news, because there's some other benefits that come along with this, and that there's some options that will be considered to be much less scary than traditional racing. So you could actually find yourself interesting new people into racing who may have never thought of it before, because by limiting the gatherings, you're also making these things less daunting to people who might have thought, oh, I'm not doing that because it's too hectic and too busy. So now there are huge positives to this, as well as the fact that this is saying that you can, done properly, have competitive sport.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jack. Cool. So kind of the next point, I guess, is where are we now? So this has been lifted straight out of the racing guidance documents. So we are pretty much early stages of step 2 there. So you'll see all of those bits of kind of guidance have been lifted out of the DCMS and the government guidance and dropped in there. And so we're all sitting in that step 2. That doesn't mean we only need to think about activity that could happen in step 2. We might be thinking about step 3, or even the things that aren't in the document, such as step 4. So, you know, don't focus your mind too much on that, but that is where we are in a situation where we're looking at group sizes of 6 and no more, and needing to stay 2 meters apart. So this slide's in here just to kind of tidy up something that happened at the start of the week or over the weekend, and that was quite a lot of misleading news headlines that came out. So there was lots of stuff out there that kind of basically looked like sport was going to return to normal pretty quickly. But when you dug down into it, it really is all about elite sport, which for us is the British sailing team. So, you know, it was pretty misleading. A lot of the online reports have now changed, and they've adjusted their headlines so that they don't read so misleadingly. But I think it was just worth having that in there, because it did unfortunately fuel club members feeling kind of like everything was going to go again, and that maybe some of their committees were being a little bit slow off the mark, when actually the news was just taking the wrong end of the story, really. And we're very aware of kind of what the media does to the drive and the want of people to go racing. We've seen that from the Yachts and Yachting article that came up about the racing that happened, and you know, a club in the Midlands, and that racing did happen, and there was an article about it. But that's not to say that every club should or could operate that sort of activity. So why are we doing this now? You guys will have seen this slide before if you've been on the forums before. What we're looking at is, if your club is considering a number of different competition styles in order to access some level of competition in your club, each one needs to be individually risk assessed and the controls looked at, because each different type of racing activity will have different risk attached to it, both with COVID risk but also sailing risk. So we need to look into that and kind of pick out what the risks are for each level of competition, and then we can start to look at policies and procedures later and phasing them into our return to sailing. For all of this, we do need to be thinking about the obligations of our club. And as much as lots of people do want to get racing, and for some people it is the reason they sail, we do still have to comply with regulations, and we should be always thinking about protecting our club members. So those thoughts need to be at the top of our mind when we are risk assessing, because we have an obligation to look after our members, but also our volunteers and staff as well. So this is where we get to our first chat, really, and our first conversation, and that is that what we're hoping to do here. Oh, you're losing me intermittently. Is that everybody? Jack, can you hear me okay, or am I?
Yeah, I've got you all the time.
I'll sit a bit closer, which might be scary for some, but I'll come a bit closer and see if that helps. So hopefully we can look at this, and what we'd like to do at the moment is not think about the challenges. Challenges is question 2. So what we want to think about is, are there clubs out there at the moment that have got formats of competition that they've seen either through media or the RYA information or just through their past experience that they're thinking of running at the moment, they might want to share with others, or formats that they're thinking might be available in step 3. So if we've got any clubs that have got that at the moment, you feel free to put your hand up if you have, and we'll try and come to you and you can kind of explain it or talk it through for us. Don't be scared. I know there's not many of us this evening. No? Should we get Pete up on the screen as well? Because you guys might have some experience of some of this stuff. So I think we'll probably come to Jack first of all, and just kind of ask you, Jack, if you know, is there a type of racing that you've put in the guidance notes that you think is a kind of early stage type of competition level? Maybe I shouldn't use the word racing, but an early stage of competition for the clubs.
I think the first step that we've looked at is essentially racing on your own. It's about the only way I can describe it. So challenges around either a fixed course or a fixed distance or a fixed time, where people can go out and either as simply as turning on Strava, they can find out how far they've sailed in an hour, using unfortunately the windsurfing section of Strava, or if you've got certain marks that are close to your clubhouse and you want people to go and race around them and see how fast they can do it, they can go and do that sort of thing, or see how fast that they can go. I think Beat Racing offer a 100-meter fastest time or a 500-meter fastest time, and that's the simplest, easiest way of allowing people to find their competitive edge. You need to just temper that with the thought that if people are going to go and try and sail as fast as possible, then they're potentially going to go storm chasing, and that's not the most conservative approach. So thinking about methods that you can put in place to make sure you're not encouraging people to go sailing in 30 knots of breeze. After that, I think one of the key issues at the moment is gathering sizes and trying to ensure that we don't have too many people in one place at one time, be that on shore getting ready to go sailing or on the water. And so start lines, traditional start lines become an issue. They become a visible focal point for people to see what looks like a gathering of people on boats. So what can we do to mitigate that? And so various different formats like pursuit racing or time gate starts or even allocated starts give people tee times like they would do in golf. So you start your race at 12:45 and you start yours at 12:50 and you start yours at 12:55 sort of thing. Those are the sort of means that we've looked at for combating that approach.
And we've seen clubs do that with their recreational sailing quite successfully already, and they're giving those time slots, and I think so that's a really good idea because it just breaks up that shore opportunity on the shore for there to be lots of numbers, whether that be launching on the dinghies or up and down the pontoons, so or launching their tenders to get out, or in some clubs case, you know, using the ferry boat to get out to their moored boats. So yeah, that's great. Have any of the clubs got in the room got any questions about the things they're thinking about doing that they're not sure whether they fit within guidance or not, or is there anything that's kind of a burning question for people about racing, or are we all sitting back from racing at the moment and thinking this is something for further down the line? No hands up. You're a quiet bunch this evening. Okay, cool. So Pete Musket, any ideas you've got?
Well, I don't know really what people are doing at the moment, but I do know there's a few things out there. I know that maybe some of the Plymouth clubs could comment on the white sail racing format that they have there, where there's I think they start any point during an hour self time, and that's been going on for many years, and I can't see why that would, or that could potentially fit within guidance. Frampton on 7 have got a lovely box. They sit on the end of their jetties. They don't have to have a race officer that clumps down the start times, and they all this pursuit race there. So, you know, again, if you had some onshore management, I think then that could be adapted potentially. I think there are ideas already out there. Oh, and of course, the Laser 2000 Class Association have got their kind of ongoing Bart's Back type racing, where you sail an upwind downwind course of whatever length you like, and then some maths is done later. There are lots of ideas that exist that have been used before all of this restricted our sailing.
Okay, yeah, cool. Thanks, Pete. Phil Hooper's put his hand up. So, Phil, you're unmuted. You need to unmute yourself. Oh, you've done that already?
Yeah.
Go for it, Phil, far away. Just
Hi
introduce
there.
yourself, Phil, because we won't all know where you're from.
Yes, okay. Phil Hooper from Saltash Sailing Club on the Tamar River between Cornwall and England. We've first of all taken the steps for recreational sailing with dinghies and with yachts. And that would be following the guidelines. We initially took the steps that there wouldn't be any racing this year, mainly because of the guidelines that we'd been following. I did attend the forum this afternoon and got some information, and I quite like the idea of the timed gate start, especially with the location that we're in, both for dinghies and yachts. It gives us the opportunity to be able to sail a course. For instance, the yachts could sail into Plymouth Sound, which would probably take an hour. Well, obviously, there's different size boats, either single-handed, family groups, household groups, and for dinghies we could do very much the same sort of thing. Not necessarily go into the sand. We're some maybe 5 miles away from Plymouth Sound itself. The challenges that we've got are obviously the club facility. Changing rooms are closed and would be closed. We've opted to keep the changing rooms open for toilets only. We've adopted at present priority on the pontoon and priority on the slipways that we've got. That's about it for the moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Phil, like as you say there, I mean, at the moment changing rooms aren't to be opened, and it is only toilet facilities. That's quite very clear in the guidance. But I think many clubs are managing in that situation. You know, they're managing with the toilets open and just coping in that way. So I think, as you say, those time starts definitely allow an opportunity for people. Pete Bone, we've got a question that's popped up that I know you were talking to me about the other day, from Richard Miller. It says, if you're running an organised activity, do you need to have safety boat cover? So I'll come over to you on that one, and I'll find Richard Miller on the list and unmute him.
Right.
Okay, Richard, you're unmuted, but I think your question's fairly clear. Pete, do you want to give us a bit of your thoughts on that?
So if it's the Richard Miller, I think it is, Avon Sailing Club Richard Miller, yeah? Richard, can you hear?
Oh, you're muted, Richard, at the moment. Sorry, you need to unmute yourself. Just need to press the microphone button.
Oh, okay, Richard. Right, guys, well, the question that's been asked on the screen is if you're running an organised activity. So there's first of all to say there, we're actually still saying organised activity, really in the full sense of the word no, but it talks about then having safety cover. So what we're really saying on safety cover is that if there are very strong prerequisites, saying your landlord insists that you must have safety cover and you're on waters that deem it necessary, then you probably still have to do it. But you must absolutely risk assess what you're doing, thinking about the people that are going to man it from the same house. If you're going single man, what can you do? Is it safe? Is it operable? And what do you do if you come to the worst when you are acting in danger of life? So what we're really saying is that it's a possibility to put a safety boat on if you so need it. But just, if I may just expand a little thing that was spoke about, and Jack might want to talk about this as well, is in nowhere do the RYA actually lay down any rules that say that you must have safety boats available when you're club racing? Training, different matter. So just try not to get confused. I've got a nod from Jack, so I've not kicked myself in the left foot. So in terms of where we are, just think about it, Richard, and what you're trying to do, and risk assess it. And also, you know, you've got the flow on the river as well to think about. So think about the mitigation that you might do about course, wind, and all the things that go with it. So it's a big risk assessment, really, Rob, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. And I think the other thing is important to say is if you've always put a safety boat on the water, you can't now just go, well, we're just not going to do it. You know, before you thought it was necessary before. So if it was necessary before, it's still necessary now. And if you're going to then not put one on, as Pete just said, you need to change what you're doing in order to make it safer and therefore not need one. So some of the dinghy examples of that are reduced number of craft on the water, masthead floats. So by putting all of these things in place, we may now be able to put a safety boat on the water for one person in, whereas our policy is set 2 people previously. You know, that's an example. So I think, you know, is that, oh, you're unmuted. Awesome. Is that okay?
That's perfect. Yes, thank you. Yes, we just need to watch out because obviously because we're on a river, there's bends and twists, and very often the race officer can't see all the races at any one time. So yeah, we'll have to consider that, I think.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
We are currently working on videos and forums about safety cover specific things, which we're probably kind of 2 to 3 weeks away from revisiting that we originally looked at when we looked at recreational sailing. So we're going to go round in a big loop and see what we know now. Quite a few more hands up now. Gay Slater from Flushing, you've had your hand up for a while. You're unmuted, Gay. If you want to fire away with your question or comment.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay, my first one is that we did a risk assessment and sent it into Falmouth Harbour Master, and he queried the fact that we didn't have any safety cover written into our risk assessment. Now, we don't normally do safety cover because we only race keelboats, and they're deemed, you know, according to the rules, as the racing rules, to be self-supporting and self-rescuing, and they're honour bound to support each other and go to each other's aid if need be. But I said to him in reply, we have that, but also we're asking competitors when we do actually start to buddy up, and that is more than your average boating advice at the moment is. So, I mean, I'm assuming we've done the right thing by saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so. And it's kind of situation normal in that sense, isn't it? And I think that's fine to say that. You know, things haven't got worse just because COVID's arrived from a safety sailing point of view. So yeah, I think if it's what you've always done, I think that's a very strong argument, and you've put an extra bit of caution in there to prevent RNLI the need for lifeboat or RNLI as well by buddying up. I think you've done a fine job. So hopefully they'll accept that and you can carry on.
Just said as like all harbour masters, he just said thank you. So it's pretty well, he's not giving anything away. The other thing I've got a query about is we want to run a pursuit series. Does this mean that we can't have more than, assuming people have got 2 crew in each boat, you know, like a Nordic folk boat might have 2 crew, we can only have 3 boats on the same start time?
Over to Jack on that one, I think.
So this is going to be one of these annoying situations where I don't actually answer your question, but the legislation that underlies everything that's going on says, for the purposes of this regulation, there is a gathering when 2 or more people are present together in the same place in order to engage in any form of social interaction with each other or to undertake any other activity with each other. So for the purpose of what we're talking about, it's present together at the same place and to undertake any other activity with each other. So those are essentially the criteria to turn something into a gathering. So this is why I sort of touched on this very briefly earlier. What can you do to essentially prevent those 2 things happening at the same time? And so if you're talking about one designs competing within a pursuit race, then that's when you're going to start to come into this situation whereby something could be visible and look like a gathering. And it's, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then most people are going to assume it's a duck. So what could you do to change that? Then could you be looking at the golf tee time idea instead of a pursuit race, or personal handicapping? There's a video that's hopefully coming out tomorrow where the sailors did personal handicapping themselves, i.e. I finished 20 seconds behind that person in the previous race. I'm going to start 20 seconds in front of them and see if I can stay in front, sort of thing. So it can be fairly informal, but I don't think we're ever going to answer your question of what is a gathering and what isn't a gathering. But hopefully that may have been helpful. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Sorry for being deliberately evasive.
No, I'm just saying thank you.
You'll make a great harbour master.
Yeah, so I think I think we touched on it earlier, and it is in the earlier forum, and it is a really hard thing to look at about the number of boats on the water. And what we must remember is people's view of our club and our sport as well, and what it looks like from the outside. It is really important to all of us. And you know, we don't want to be the ones hitting the headlines with a photo of 30 boats on a start line. You know, it's not going to go well, is it? It's not going to do any of us any good at all, the club or the sailing as a whole. So I think, you know, that's worth thinking about. But I think many times we will be able to spread people out in the way that we run some of these opportunities and these challenges effectively. It's like competition challenge rather than actually racing that I think is feasible in these first stages. Okay, cool. We've got a couple more questions. So we've got a Duncan has asked, would a crew of a rescue boat count as part of the 6 people in the group? Now that also comes back slightly to the same question, because you're saying is that boat part of the group of sailors? Training department in their guidance that they changed this week are absolutely saying yes, they do. So you could train 5 ecos single-handed with 1 safety boat driver, and that is then your 6. So from the training point of view, yes, it does. And so therefore from racing, I would expect a similar answer, really. I think we're probably sitting in a similar situation. That, you know, if you're going to set off a group of boats and there's 5 of them and you're putting a safety boat there, that is 6. I think possibly if you've just got 1 safety boat on the water and lots of boats sailing around, as happens at club recreational sailing, then, you know, that's a slightly different question. So it depends how you're organising the event, I would suggest, and how you're organising the kind of competition that you're hosting. Good. So Bob Penfold's got his hand. Oh, Phil Hooper's put a comment. So you've got a comment on safety facilities, Phil. So I'll unmute you if you want to go. That would be great.
Yeah. Yes, it was just a comment to reinforce what I spoke about earlier, and that was in our original brief that went out to members for dinghy sailing or recreational sailing in dinghies. We said that the safety facilities would not be available. And the reason for that is that it became an organised event, and we put in considerations for the helm or for the skipper of the dinghies to think about the problems of sailing on a river. And especially in the confines of the river, there are yacht moorings as well, which if the safety facilities were put on the water, we've got a risk assessment that requires 2 people to be in the safety boat. So it basically precludes putting safety on the water. So for the dinghies to look at things like buddy sailing, to have a lanyard tow rope, to have other means of propulsion, you know, the old paddle as we used to have, which a lot of boats don't seem to have these days.
Yeah, Phil, I think you're right, Phil, in that our racers can put a lot of additional aid to themselves. Absolutely. So just as in recreational sailing, there's, you know, it might be that the club decide that when they are racing, they now have to carry an anchor, whereas they may not have done before, and they have to carry a paddle and an additionally long tow line. So things like that can certainly be changed for the racers. But in the same sense, clubs can change their safety boat guidelines as well, as long as they re-risk assess. So you could go to one person in a safety boat if you wanted, as long as you kind of justify how you've made that acceptable. So what have you done to reduce the need for two in the boat? So maybe lesser wind conditions, or better, you know, better sailing conditions, or lower ratio of boats on the water, for example. So there are lots of different ways to skin the cat effectively. You've got lots of different opportunities to work around it, or just with those guidance and just make sure that you get the best for your club so that everybody's as safe as possible, and that it still fits within COVID guidelines. That's kind of the challenge that all the clubs are facing. But
yeah.
Thanks for your thoughts on extra kit and things. I think that is good.
Yeah, thank you.
Bob Penfold's got his hand up, so I'm going to come to you, Bob, and then we'll probably maybe move on to the next question, I think. So, Bob, fire away.
It was just to say that we've this evening approved a new policy and procedures for the use of club ribs to support, I use the word support advisedly, recreational social sailing. At the moment we're focusing on recreational social. We're working hard in the background to see how we can best introduce some element of racing at the soonest opportunity, but there are certain limitations, not in least the fact the clubhouse isn't open. But we produced a policy here that requires either family groups to be manning the rib and or certain qualified people, more highly qualified people if they're single manning. So we're talking about powerboat instructors, safety boat, senior instructors, etc. We are separating the use of the rib from it being an organised activity. This is a rib being used to support recreational sailing. It's not an organised activity in which we are providing a rib. So if a rib is available and a crew are available, that's fine, but that doesn't stop sailors going sailing if they choose to do so. It's entirely their risk. And we've made the very two separate distinctions here. So I'll share that with you later, Rob.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, good.
They've been recreational sailing for a couple of weeks now, and this is just a development. And the reason for it is that traditionally, if a member has wanted to borrow, in inverted commas, a club rib to go out and support somebody out there, they've been free to do that, subject to requesting it. That facility hasn't been available until we've published this, and this is about social distancing, about cleaning and maintenance of the ribs as well.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that bit actually very quickly in a moment, because we're going to look at some of the challenges, and I'm sure you'll probably have some comment then as well, Bob, around that, because there will be challenges that go with that activity. So thank you for that. Something that we haven't really touched on that I do just want to think about before we leave this question is, and Jack mentioned it in the briefing, but I think it's so valid it's worth bringing back up now, and that is that some of these activities, if you think about all of the types of racing we've talked about, they really declutter racing in some way. They take away the challenge of being on a start line with a lot of other boats. They take away the pressure of being close to other boats. You know, they don't necessarily have to be close to other boats. They take away some of the rule aspect of being very close with other boats, and the stress that can put on some people, especially newcomers. And I think that it's really important that clubs see this as an opportunity to potentially engage members who might not normally take part in their conventional racing format that they host at the club. And I think if you can try and look at it with that mindset, with a fresh canvas, you know, if we're going to run some competition, what would appeal to most of our members? You know, is a timed lap a really good idea, or is a maximum boat speed a really good idea, or is a bit of two boat racing a really good idea? You know, and what would appeal to your members? And as always, communication with your members is the best way to find that out, and kind of just passing some ideas around. But don't just pass them around your racers, pass them around the other sailors as well. Because I think if we're all really honest with ourselves and we ask how many of our racing numbers have gone up in recent years, it would be quite limited around the southwest. And actually, this might be an opportunity to engage some new sailors in racing. So hopefully that's some food for thought when we kind of finish on when we think about these alternative activities. And as Jack said, there's already videos going up. There's one went up online this morning, and it sounds like there's going to be another one in the next day or so about these alternative formats to give you a hand with working out how to put them in place, how to operate them, how to make them work at your club. And equally, you've got the team here, whether that's the racing department side or the sports development side. You know, we're all here to help with that. So do holler if you've got any more ideas of different formats that you'd like to have a go at and maybe don't quite understand or want a bit of help with implementing. Has anyone got any questions on formats of racing or kind of any more sudden moments of illumination before we move on to the next question?
If I can just follow up very, very briefly on the point that Phil was saying, and in fact what you were talking about in terms of extra equipment on board dinghies to maintain safe operation. Believe it or not, the offshore special regulations have an Appendix C, which is for inshore dinghy racing. So it might be a good point to start from there and add on anything else you require. But that requires a paddle, for example, a strong point for towing. And so whilst you may never have considered opening the 100 and whatever page offshore special regulations for dinghy racing, it could be worth having a look at the 2 pages that cover dinghy racing within there, but just as a starting point. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Jack, we might put a link to that in our follow-up email, if that's okay. We'll catch up before that goes out. That is great. Good stuff. Okay, you see, I've learned something this evening, worth attending for me already. Good stuff. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next and final question, which is more about the challenges. So a kind of example of maybe one we'll start on was the safety boat use. So if we're going to put a safety boat on the water, we then immediately have to think about the cleaning of it, the number of people on it, the households using it together. So, you know, we need to think about those challenges and how our club are going to manage to operate these competitions and the opportunities for the members whilst fitting within the guidelines. So we've obviously got the safety boat. Has anyone else got any challenges that they're desperately worried about or think that they might have a challenge getting over that they maybe want to voice now and other clubs might have a solution to? David Mitchell's got his hand up. I'll come to you. Okay, David, you're unmuted. You want to go for it?
I've had my hand up for the whole session actually, but so my question really relates to the other section.
That's fine. We can do that.
Okay. So I'm also from Flushing Sailing Club, and we are looking, as Gay explained, to start pursuit racing, and I'm slightly confused as to what constitutes a group of people in a space. We are looking at running a pursuit race, and generally within each of the pursuit sections we will probably only have 2 or 3 boats. I personally sail a Nordic folk boat, which Gay alluded to, and we're putting 2 people on that boat. So, and within our class and our timed section on the pursuit, we probably only have 3 boats. So does that constitute our 6? Because we're starting at, for argument's sake, 6 o'clock in the evening, and then the next section is starting at 5 minutes later. So does that mean that we can separate our groups out rather than it all being considered as one group? To me, I'm struggling with the concept of groups on the water. I'm only thinking of groups on a boat, personally. Your views, please.
So I'll just I'll go back to the regulation wording. Let's pull it up again, which talks about whether people are present together in the same place and whether they're undertaking an activity with each other. So I will ask you the question, would the people on all of those be identifiable as being in the same place? And would they be identifiable as doing the same activity? I think those are the questions that you want to ask yourself as a club in terms of what's visible, because that's the only way you can identify a gathering. Other than people sticking their hands up saying, look at me, I'm in a gathering. Then how does it appear? And how would it be interpreted by somebody unfamiliar with the sport who just happens to observe what's going on? So are they in the same place? Are they doing the same thing? Essentially, 6 strangers walking past 6 strangers are in the same place, but they're not engaged in the same activity. They're doing separate activities. But 2 boats engaged in the same activity in the same area would be a gathering, I believe, according to the regulation that's been laid down. Does that help?
I think the regulations have been written not considering sailing or boating, to be honest. And I don't think
the regulations have been written considering any sport in particular. And I don't think we should be getting into debate about whether they're applicable to sailing or would be good as a design for sailing. The problem is that is what is written down, and that's what we have to comply with.
Okay.
And
I don't think anybody would disagree with that statement that you made, but unfortunately that's not the situation we're in.
And if we think about that example you're setting, where the 3 boats head off with 2 people in each boat, that is a cluster of boats. So maybe for the moment, those 3 boats need to take part in one activity. That is 6 people taking part in an activity that's permitted within the guidance. And we need to come to pursuit racing at a later stage when the group sizes become larger, or the guidance changes slightly, because that would still allow for some racing within those 3 boats and some competition. And I think that possibly is a format to look at that would be very safe. And we as a team, we've been talking, and the RYA have been talking, there have been lots of different discussions about it. And the problem is they're guidance notes, as you say, David, that aren't written for sailing, and we have to kind of interpret them. And I think Jack's done a good job of kind of saying, look at the outside in view to think about that. And I think, you know, there are clubs who are definitely operating on the darker side of grey, I would say, and clubs that are operating on the whiter side of grey. And you've got to work as a club out which part of that you feel happy in. And every club's making different decisions. It's very visible when you look around the country, just on social media and things. It's not difficult to see. So I think, you know, you've got some opportunity there to host some activity and some competition. And I'd run, if personally, I'd run with a simpler format, sticking super safe. But that's my own personal view on it and the way that I feel about it. But I think, you know, it is down to each club and how they choose to operate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think that perhaps the question is, can you have more than 6 people taking part in a race? And the answer to that is yes, as long as you can make sure that you're not going to fall foul of the guidance and the legislation and everything that's in place. So the specific example that you've talked about with 3 boats with 2 people, as long as everybody's socially distanced if they're not living in the same household, and that they never get within 2 meters of each other between the boats, isn't a problem. Including that within a race whereby there's more boats isn't a problem, as long as you're mitigating the risk of any of those people forming groups larger than 6. But I think in terms of thinking outside that specific example, and as Rob's alluded to, taking it when it gets more popular, you've got to keep thinking back to that original point of, are they in the same place? Are they doing the same activity? Because that's when they become a gathering. So we're not trying to tell anybody that you can only race with 6 human beings, but gathering sizes are limited. So how do you make sure that any competitive activity you do complies with those guidelines? DCMS, the Department for Culture, Digital Culture, Media and Sport, want you to think outside the box, and pursuit races are a good way of doing that. But when you talk about your folk boats with 2 people on board, I think when you get a 4th folk boat turning up, I don't know if there is one, but then trying to start at the same time, that's where you start to fall foul of legislation. So it's thinking about, the example you've given is fine. Thinking about what's next is where we just want you to think about taking it back to that original, essentially, risk assessment.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. If you want to discuss it more, David, I'm sure Jack or myself can pick it up offline with a phone call. We'd be more than happy to do that. But I mean, as Jack's alluded to as well, there isn't always an answer, unfortunately, at the moment. There aren't answers to all of these. So Michael Batchelor's got his hand up. I might just come back to boats for a moment. We know that you've got to social distance. We know you've got to stay 2 meters apart. Do just think that those 2 people on the boat, although they don't officially have to be from the same household if they can stay 2 meters apart on the boat, you must question whether that's achievable. But not only the 2 meters, but you must think about surface contamination. And on the boat, you are both going to be touching the same things, and so social distancing isn't the only consideration of putting 2 people on the boat. The surface contamination is as well. So I think reality states at the moment we probably are stuck to the same household sailing, even if you're on a kind of 40-meter boat where you could comfortably be 2 meters apart. You're at some point you're probably going to touch the same piece of rope or equipment, or button maybe on a 40-meter boat. Cool. Okay, so Michael, we've unmuted you. Do you want to have a comment either about a challenge that you've got with racing or competition or type of competition?
So just listening, these are good ideas. I mean, some folks know I was on last week. I'm from Clevedon, so the safety vote for us is not a discussion point. End of. But thinking about racing, there are some good ideas about pursuit and timed and so on. But just being to Jack's point about what's perceived to be. I'm just thinking pragmatically, you could put out 6 lasers, that's fine, and they bimble around. But if you get other boats out, you could all spread out and be, especially if I was in the laser, I'd be 200 yards beyond the next laser. But of course, you're all going to be mixing up. You're going to be then all rounding marks. As far as the thousands of people walking on the seafront are concerned, they just see boats bimbling around. Pragmatically, is this feasible to race, or is it really the whole kind of boats on the water? Inevitably, you will find yourself, just by chance, if you're any kind of handicap situation, you could be all spaced out, and then 10 minutes later, you could be all going in the same mark together. So pragmatically, it seems to be you'd have to have a fairly limited number of boats in any kind of dinghy-sized course, unless you're in Weymouth Bay somewhere kind of thing. But for clubs like small clubs and small courses, you're going to have to limit the number of boats on the water, because you cannot guarantee that you're not going to have 7 boats going around the pier mark together.
Absolutely. There are some clubs.
People put the beach to be close together.
There are some clubs racing only 6 boats a night, choosing a fleet each night, and they put their name down and they go on a rota, and there are clubs doing that with 6 boats racing at a time. So absolutely, in the current situation, in where we are in step 2, we are talking about massively limited boats on the water, or solo competition. And don't remember that, don't forget that could be a real big draw to some people, that solo competition, the time trials, and I was a little bit dubious of it, but then I've seen some of the successes and spoken to some of the clubs that are really winning with it and really enjoying it. So I think, it's not to be knocked, and for some people it will do the job.
No, I think those are quite good ideas. I think the time kind of 500 meters, kilometer leg, whatever it is, those kind of things could be quite appealing. Just something different. You could then be pretty well spaced out. Those to me sound a better idea in the short term than maybe pursuit racing. So as you say, think outside the box and all that.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's great, Michael. Okay, so Ian, we're going to come to you next.
Yeah, thanks Robert. Ian from Avon as well. Yeah, we just started the sort of social sailing. From a racing point of view, we're looking further ahead. You say not until July, really. I think from when we think about it is on the water in terms of the social distancing, it's generally not so much of a problem. And I take the point back, we're very concerned about what's it look like from outside, but also we're not trying to look for ways around the rules. I think we need to think quite carefully. We've got, members who are in the at-risk category, and we'd like them to feel comfortable to be able to come to the club if they can. And I think, if we're starting to sort of push it in areas, that could disenfranchise those members as well, who then feel that they're just not comfortable coming down. And in reality, whilst I think, you could argue we could have less than 6 in groups on the water, it's when they come off the water. I mean, I appreciate all clubs are different, but from our club particularly, once they come off the water, you've got at the beginning, at the end, you've got an activity of people, which is more than the 6. Even if everyone's set off 10 minutes at different times, by the time they come off, it takes longer than 10 minutes to de-rig a boat. So therefore, you're going to have those people, and that's potentially where the higher risk is. So I think.
Yeah, and that was actually what this second question was all about, is those other challenges. And what are the challenges? If you're going to host competition, one of the challenges is putting off the other members who might want to come down recreationally, and the challenge of having that many people on the shore, and the challenge of the slipways or the pontoons. And I think the clubs must risk assess that and must look at that when they're in that situation. We can't just kind of think, oh, it's okay, we're desperate to go racing, because actually our kind of stats also show that not everybody is desperate to go racing. When you look at the number of sailors in the country and the number of races, actually it's important that we provide sailing for everybody. And racing is something that some people want to do, so we want to try and do that as well. But it's not an instead of, as you quite rightly say. So yeah, that's good. Folks, it's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to have to move on from this topic. If anybody has got a burning question, then please do catch us offline afterwards. And I'm sorry to put people's hands down, but I'm going to put your hands down. If it's something that really can't wait, you can come up in the questions at the end. But I'm keen to try and stick to time where possible. Good, so we'll just head back to the slides. So I want to just think about this carefully for a moment and think about what is next for your club, what steps do they need to do, and considering which type of competition may be of interest to your members is really crucial at this point. Have you got some formats that you could feel comfortable delivering that you feel would be appealing to your members? And check it out with your members, discuss it with the cruising group, discuss it with the Friendly Friday sailors, discuss it with the Social Saturday sailors, discuss it with the laser class, discuss it with the aeros, discuss it with the yachts, and just have that feel of which ones you're going to plan for. Once you've done that, you need to make sure that those ideas are going to fit within phase 1 or 2 or step 1 or 2, and you need to risk assess each of them, including all of their activities. So from the moment they drive through the gate all the way through to the moment they drive back out of the gate, all of the support that's required to go with it. Can you see my slides, or have they paused themselves? Jack, give us a thumbs up if you can see my slides. Yep, good. Okay, thank you. So do the risk assessment, and then you need to create the policies and procedures, the racing instructions, everything that's going to go with it, and have them ready to send them in a good communication to your members at the time when you want to start that within the phasing of your club return. Because many clubs have got this multi-stage return to sailing, and you might decide one particular competition type lives in phase 4 and another one lives in phase 2. But if you've got all that communication ready to go, you've thought about it, you've got it backed up ready, that would be the best position to be in for you. So that really just confirms that. So you've done the risk assessment, look at the policies, and then remember to communicate them with everyone. So don't just send the communication out to your racing email list. Make sure you send it out to everybody, just in case you might be appealing and enticing new competitive sailors from within your club. So all the support that's been there previous weeks is there. Hopefully you're finding these forums useful, and that's going to continue. The development team are there. I'm at the end of my email, but equally with the racing, I think, Jack's right in the middle of all of this, and so are the racing team. And really, racing questions will be pointed better at them. And that is, yes, me doing my slopey shoulders moment. But I think it's kind of it's better to point you in the right direction from the start, start off. So yeah, you know, do contact Jack if you've got specific racing questions, but equally feel free to come to us about the safety boat issues and all those other thoughts and problems you're having. And the bottom three there, as always, on the home page of the website, you have got the COVID-19 hub, the Sail from Home hub, which is all of the kind of videos that Jack's mentioned and that side of things, and then the return to boating page, where you can find all the guidance notes that you might need. Next week, we're looking at how you can plan to safely restart training activity. And I appreciate that might be very different people that are in this forum, but there will be people from your club who might be involved. So please do pass that message on to the training department if you have one, or the person who does the coaching. If that's not you, then please do pass that round and make sure it gets to the right person to join in. Next week, just 2 sessions, 3:30 and 7 o'clock. Feel free to join whichever of those you prefer. And as always, booking on the return to boating page is the best way to do that. So in summary, it's not back to normal, and not all racing is going to be possible for some time. But through the discussion and all of that with your club, you're going to be able to come up with some competition type, if you want to, that is viable under COVID-19 regulations. So have a look at that, work out what's going to be appealing to your members, and then go through the risk assessment process, and then make sure that you are communicating it to all your members, just to see if we can make the best of this bad situation and increase our active members. And finally, just kind of making sure we follow that conservative and considerate approach. Everybody's been doing a fantastic job of that. Everybody we've seen on the Southwest, all the messages we get, you know, people are genuinely being conservative about it, and I think that's really helpful for the sport. So a massive thank you for all the efforts you're all putting in. So yes, that's I think it from me. We will go around the team quickly to see if there's any final points from the team. So we'll start. Oops, sorry, that's me trying to get my cameras back. We'll start with Pete Bone. Pete, anything from you?
Yeah, just a quickie, just as we said on the other meetings, Rob, communication key to your members, guys. I know you know it, but just to affirm, make sure they understand, get it into them clearly, and then you get buy-in from everybody, make your job simpler. Add my thanks to you all. Thank you.
Pete Musket?
Yeah, my message is always the same. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's maybe not the right time, maybe it is the right time, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Thanks, Pete. And Jack?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is plan ahead. No one's crystal ball is perfect, but plan ahead and adapt as things come along. I think when we first put the guidance document out, we followed Boris's steps 1, 2, and 3, and there seems to be like 1.5 and 2.2 and all this kind of stuff. So we tried, and we just have to keep adapting to what happens in the next hours, days, weeks, and months. So yeah, plan ahead and adapt.
Great. So that is it from us. I can see David Mitchell's got his hand up, but what I'm going to say is good night to everybody. But David, you're welcome to stay online and we will have a chat, but I don't want to hold people longer than they feel. Oh, David's put his hand down. Okay, cool. In that case, thank you all, everybody. Good night, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Rob.